Hi, I'm Talal Esmani, and welcome to another segment of Mawaheb Chats. We're here with Adam Goodman. He's been the president of Paramount Pictures Film Group for the past 7 years. And we're also here with Imagination's development team. So let me introduce everybody. This is Hannah, Abdallah, Lubna, and Latifa. So this is a chat where we sit down with you and get to pick your brain. Okay. And let's keep it casual. I have a question I want to start off with. You've headed so many movies, from Interstellar to Tropic Thunder. Tropic Thunder, from comedies like I Love You Man and Anchorman, and you've done an animation movie recently, SpongeBob Squarepants, the movie. Which one of those was your favorite experience?
You know, they're all completely unique and amazingly different experiences. I think, weirdly, it's the movies that were the most near disasters that are probably my favorite experiences because I learned the most. World War Z was a picture that I oversaw, and it was a very famous, complicated production, but the amount of learning that took place during the making of it and the fact that we survived and there's a sequel on the way is something that I think I'm most proud of because ultimately, you know, being a movie executive is almost like being a physician. If you have more time to do your job, it's almost like you're practicing your position. So as long as you're able to have a career that you're able to outlast the misses that you were involved with and learn from them, then you're able to do a better job. So I think World War Z was probably by far one of the most fun that I had working on a movie.
Great. Which one was the easiest movie? So in your case, the most boring?
Well, I wouldn't say it was boring because that sets me up, but Interstellar was something that was, you know, it was just a turnkey production. Christopher Nolan is such a, you know, just a masterful filmmaker that once we handed over the script to him, which he developed for many years with his brother, it was, we showed up at the director's cut of the film, and essentially what we saw at the director's cut was exactly what we released in the cinema. I mean, his vision for it was there from the day he first showed us the movie, and it was really, it was an incredible experience just seeing that movie come together.
Where did your humble beginnings start from?
Well, I was a production assistant for many, many, many years, and then an assistant. We were talking earlier, I worked for a filmmaker named John Hughes, who was in Chicago, and I worked for free. I was in high school, and John was making a lot of movies in the city that I grew up in, and so I just kept showing up in his office and asking if I can help out, and eventually I was, you know, they didn't kick me out of the office after a couple weeks, and I would keep showing up, and it turned into a very, very, very low-paying job, but I frankly never would have told them this. I would have done it for free for many years later. It was such an exciting place to be around.
That's very inspirational to hear. You know, someone can go that far and not have, like you said, just knowing someone.
Yeah. And
that's pretty inspiring.
To be honest, I have felt this my entire career, and I suspect you guys feel very similarly about this, which is 99.9% of the time that I've done what I've done, I would have done for free. It never felt like work to me. It has always felt just, you know, like, how are we getting away with this? How are we getting paid to be working on these kinds of, you know, films and these kinds of working with these, you know, with these filmmakers and these artists, and the whole thing is just, it's a really wonderful way to make a living.
And but it's not misleading to say that it's an easy job. It's a lot of hours.
Oh no, it's a killer job, and that's part of the whole delight of it, is that you have to revel in kind of the misery of it. The art is pain, and so you have to know that you're working harder than the person who's in the office across from you, and you have to know that, you know, again, in as much fun as you're having, it's also very much, I mean, the politics and the game of filmmaking is something that you have to really celebrate and understand that this is something that the person that's sitting next to you is that same kid that you were when you were there, that was showing up and is just as happy to go on the run and take your office afterwards. So knowing that is always the sort of the world that you're in is something that you can either be daunted by or you can take that on and be inspired by. And I've always felt like the scariest thing that could possibly happen to any of us in our careers is complacency, because the second you feel like you've arrived or that you've sort of come to a place where you're like, look at where I am, that's the moment you're dead.
And at what point did you know that you wanted to get into the film business? Like, at what moment in your life were you like, this is what I wanted to do?
I didn't know it as a business, but I will never forget going to see the movie E.T. in a movie theater and being so profoundly and deeply affected by that experience of the movie was something that from that point on, I couldn't stop going to movies on the weekends. My parents would just drop me off and I would watch whatever was there and sneak into the theaters and watch whatever was going. Probably a lot of movies I wasn't supposed to be watching at that point in my life. And I kept doing that, but in those days, when I got a few years older, there used to be something called public access television, which in order for cable companies to come into local communities and get carriage, they had to make deals with the communities that they would set up community access television stations, and they had great equipment and great facilities, really all for the for the community to access and to produce local content. And so as a 10-year-old, I would go by the studio and and it was like being in mission control. You'd get to work have a headset on, and amazingly you'd talk to someone, and on the other side of it someone would talk back to you, and we were creating really bad music videos back in those days, which weren't even really qualified as music. But from the second I got into that studio, I never wanted to leave. So it was I was very early on.
While you're here, you were able to see a lot of things that we've worked on and are currently working on. Yesterday, you got to watch a very early cut of the film Zinzana.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Totally badass. I thought it was really exciting. What you guys are creating here, and to be at the nascent stages of this emerging film business is so exciting, and you can see it in that movie. As I was saying to you guys earlier, when you watch a filmmaker who has never done this before, but is basically creating everything as he or she goes, sometimes it's a hot mess and it's really hard to watch. And then sometimes you see something like the film that I saw yesterday, and you just feel the attitude. You just feel the the audacity of it and the originality of it. And to be, I don't want to reveal anything about the movie or the plot, but I almost couldn't say anything that would ruin the experience of it, because it was so twisty and turny, and at every point the director did such a terrific job of compelling the story forward and just changing your expectations. So just when you thought you knew a little bit of where it was going to go, it kept subverting your expectations of it. And it's a very contained movie, and yet you never really felt claustrophobic. So I looked at something like that and think, if you are able to achieve something that early on in the launch of what you guys are doing with a filmmaker who is someone that you're homegrown and that you guys are advocating, I think the promise of this business is so exciting, just because it felt really disruptive. It just felt utterly unique to me, that you couldn't compare it to anything other than an auteur film, which is just a wonderful place to be starting. It didn't feel like you were mimicking anything else that was out there. And I think that's the opportunity, which is if you're starting a business and starting an industry and really trying to create a voice for and a place for filmmakers.
Well, Adam, you've touched on the realities of working with a studio, which is you always have to consider the analysis. You got to analyze the project at development stage and then again at the production. Now, what are some of the misconceptions about working with a studio as a filmmaker, more specifically a writer, and then as a producer?
It's a really good question. For some reason, and maybe it's because I've been a lifelong studio executive, people are programmed to hate studios.
Right.
Fanboys get online and they just rage about the studios and the sort of all of the bad decisions that we ultimately make. But they forget that there's two things. One, it's a business, and so obviously we have to make shrewd decisions because we have to be able to justify what we're making. And two, we're fans. We love what we're doing, and sometimes we make mistakes. But you know, I don't think that there is an industry that respects their creators as much as the entertainment business does. And a really, really, really good studio system and a really good studio group really is a terrific place for filmmakers to both stretch their legs and do things and have creative freedom, and at the same time be able to get feedback and constructive criticism. So there's a big myth that studios, you know, are artist unfriendly, or that you know, are only looking for sequels or reboots, or you know, that they're sort of creatively vapid. And the reality is that sequels and reboots are great business, but a lot of times we were making these films simply because the writers in the industry wasn't serving up a bunch of new great ideas, and it was what we were, you know, having to make simply because we had to keep the system going.
Speaking of studios, there was a time where you saw an independent film, right away from the look of the film, you knew it was an independent film. At the moment, those lines are getting blurred, are they?
Yeah.
Do you think they are?
Yeah, the fact of the matter is, and there's nothing that I think you can't achieve on film right now that is budget prohibitive. I mean, the work that I'm seeing that, you know, students are doing out of their laptop computer with visual effects is just as good as anything that we're seeing from the big visual effects companies, and vice versa. The capturing abilities right now, the digital cameras that are able to capture movies with low light, you just can't tell the difference between something that was, you know, a big expensive day to shoot, or a little expensive movie. And that's the thing I think is so game changing about where the business is at right now, is because there's no real barrier for entry. It used to be that Hollywood was the only place that you could go to get those kinds of funds to make movies on that scale. But nowadays you can't tell the difference between any of these things, which I think once that happens, it becomes an opportunity for younger filmmakers to really blow the pants off the way things have been done, and that's the most exciting thing that exists out there right now. Yeah.
Because for me, I'm still a student in university. I just want to know your advice. What message would you give young filmmakers here in this country to start out in the film industry? Like, is there any advice you'd like to give out, or any inspirational message you'd like to give us as film students? Create.
You know, the whole concept and the whole idea of the word produce is to create something from nothing, is literally to make something, and to not in any way whatsoever be afraid of failing, first of all, because that's the way that you'll get better, as we started the conversation, to know that you have to be able to learn from your mistakes, but to not overthink things, to not try to figure out what's going to be the next big hit, or the thing that's going to be, you know, the biggest, widest playing thing in the entire world, but instead just really focus on today. What am I making into a reality, whether it's just writing a scene every day, or trying to, you know, get some ideas into just a notepad for ideas that later on in your career you want to try to, you know, see happen, or watching tons and tons and tons and tons of TV shows and cartoons, and reading comic books, and reading great old fables and classic literature, and just whatever you can be doing to create every single second of your life. Because that is the thing that this job gives you the ability to, and to never stop. Because once you stop, those ideas just somehow, it's not a well that just keeps on giving. You have to keep pumping it and pumping and pumping it. But just to create every single day of your life, that's the one advice that I wish I could do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming here. It was a pleasure and an honor.
As I said to you earlier, the honor, honestly, is mine to be at the center of something that you guys are creating and witness to. This business that feels like it's just ready to explode. It's really cool to be a part of it and to see what's going on. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, cool.
Thank you. And if you want to be here in person for our next Mawaheb chat, please let us know at info@imagenation.ae.